Okay, everyone, I think we're going to roll right into our next panel. Welcome to Resilient Clean Energy Policy and Political Wins. I am Congressman Kevin Mullin, very proud to represent the 15th Congressional District, which includes the southeastern corner of San Francisco, as well as much of San Mateo County. I'm in my third year in the House, did 10 years in the California State Legislature, 8 of them as the Speaker Pro Tem, where I was in a supermajority and in the leadership. Now I'm in the minority party at the bottom of the seniority list, if you will. But I am a new member of something called the Energy and Commerce Committee. For you federal policy folks, it is an influential committee, and I hope to work on clean energy issues on the committee. But I'm going to be doing a lot of listening and learning here with our panel of experts. We've assembled this panel to discuss clean energy policy, and why don't we go ahead and get started with brief self-introductions and a little bit of information about your organizations. And Dr. Julio, let's start with you if we can.
Thank you very much, Congressman. It is a treat to be here. Thank you for having us. I'm Julio Friedmann. I know things about stuff. I'm the chief scientist at Carbon Direct, and I have the good fortune of working with a company that brings carbon reduction and carbon removal solutions into the world through science. Our job is to separate sense from nonsense, so the entities and the companies that want to do the most and do the best can. It turns out that this is a complicated landscape. The technologies are changing fast, the policies are changing fast, the economics are changing fast, and this is a distance run. People know that if they make an investment or a purchase, they're going to be doing that for a decade or 2 or 3. A lot of our customers are focused on the hardest of the hard stuff. Their starting position is, I need to decarbonize aviation. I need to decarbonize a steel mill. We have a residual emission we cannot get rid of. We want to buy the best CO2 removal. We want to add clean energy to the grid. What happens if we do? In all of these cases, we bring the best science team into business. Some 70 people, half of our company is focused on science, and that's forestry experts to chemical and mechanical engineers, to grid experts, to policy experts, to mineralogists. You need help, we are here to provide it. We also, because of our work, we have CO2 removals for purchase today. We have looked at hundreds of companies. Out of the 700 or 800 projects we've looked at, we've taken the 30 best and created curated portfolios so you can buy CO2 removal today. We also have computational tools to let you figure out your own footprint, how to sort it out, and what decisions you can make. Under all circumstances, our job is to be enablers, to be the handmaidens to the energy transition so that people do the best out of the gate.
It's like Caroline.
Hey y'all, my name's Caroline Spears. I run Climate Cabinet, where we help state and local policymakers pass great climate policy across America. So at this time, when the federal government is chaotic, we have opportunity in this country to continue pushing the ball forward, not only through critical defense at the federal side and critical opportunities at the federal side as well, but also in state capitals across the country and in city councils across the country. So that's what we focus on. And I'm really excited to talk about opportunities in those venues today on this panel.
My name is Christina Baworowsky. I'm Vice President of Policy and Advocacy at CRES. CRES was founded after the first Trump election, and essentially it exists to teach rank and file Republicans, many on energy and commerce, basics of energy technologies. We find that when people are educated and understand technologies, they tend to make better decisions and are less likely to go into kind of messaging sprees. So I spent a lot of my time roaming the halls of Congress, teaching folks the basics of clean energy, saying it's okay to believe in things that do benefit our climate, but highlighting it in ways that resonate with Republicans. So usually through lenses of national security, energy dominance, energy abundance, and affordability. So, you said the word chaos. I say a little bit of opportunity. We have a very new Congress. We have so many new members on energy and commerce, many of which don't have opinions on many different technologies. So I spend my time trying to figure out how to make these types of policies bipartisan, figure out where we can find pragmatic means of moving forward. And, I am working a lot on protecting a lot of clean energy tax credits right now.
The first of many conversations we have, I'm sure. So we're very fortunate to have these folks with us today. So our energy system is at a crossroads, and amazingly, Republicans and Democrats seem to agree on the problem. How will our country meet rising energy demand from growth in data centers and the adoption of electric vehicles, which threatens to overload the grid and raise energy costs for everyday Americans? All this is happening at a time of significant economic uncertainty and seismic shifts in the policy landscape, that's putting it mildly, under President Trump. We have some serious challenges ahead for those of us who care about the climate and building a clean energy economy. I'd like to start off our discussion today by talking about the Inflation Reduction Act, the landmark piece of climate legislation passed under President Biden. The massive bill made historic investments in climate and clean energy. So my question for our panel, and maybe we'll start with Christina, what provisions would you say were the most important when it comes to the IRA, and how would changes to those provisions impact the growth of clean energy and decarbonization projects across the country?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And, it's something that there's a bit of divide in the Republican Party over. Tax credits, including those for technology neutral. So think, wind, solar, advanced nuclear, geothermal in the future, energy storage. There's also funding for advanced manufacturing credits. We also have ones for hydrogen, nuclear. We have carbon capture sequestration. But then there are also credits for things like electric vehicles. And, what House Ways and Means is doing right now and Senate Finance is doing is looking at them holistically. They're also checking with members on their side to figure out, all right, a lot of these credits actually have been bipartisan. A lot of them were actually enacted with Republican presidents in the past. They're going to look systematically through it, and you've heard the Speaker of the House say we're not going to use a sledgehammer, we're going to use a scalpel. And what that means realistically for projects that do help us meet our decarbonization goals are they will be looking at each individual credit, they will be reimagining it and figuring out what aligns with kind of where leadership is today. But I do feel very optimistic. You saw letters by Garbarino and 21 Republican members recently. You saw letters with Senator Curtis, Murkowski, Tillis, and Moran also saying, don't throw everything out just because it was done with the last guy. What they're saying is there's some good stuff here. We need to keep the things that do help us meet those energy demand goals. And in that progress, they're going to weigh in with Ways and Means. They're going to weigh in with finance to make sure that, factories continue being built, projects don't get canceled. So I'm fairly optimistic that, they don't have the votes to rip it all out, but do they have the votes to keep a majority of it out? That's what I'm spending a lot of my time on.
And I do want to give a shout out to the Sustainable Energy and Environment Coalition, which is working on finding the oxygen, if you will, for bipartisan support on
SEEK
the
is great. Yeah, SEEK is super helpful.
Yeah. So Carolyn, thoughts on the IRA and where we go from here?
The Inflation Reduction Act is a historical investment in the future of our country in clean energy and manufacturing. And it's unfortunate we're in this time in which we're taking that we have to fight so hard for something that delivered jobs to people across the country, delivered economic opportunity to folks across the country. Already about $8 billion in clean energy kind of plants and investment has already been canceled because of the uncertainty from Washington. So we're in a spot right now where we have to do two things on the Inflation Reduction Act and making sure that those gains are realized. It's so important to stay in the game. We have to fight for everything that we can. And it's not just this year. This will come up next year and the year after and the year after. And this is going to be a 4-year federal fight to keep all of this historic investment going. And we can do it, but it's going to be a 4-year fight. While that fight is happening, we need states to step up. This is what happened during the last Trump administration. It's also what happened in the early 2010s when Obama was president. sometimes we had states step up with their own investment tax credits at that time. We had states step up with market creating policies like 100% clean energy standards, clean electricity standards, electric vehicle standards. There's so much power that we have at state capitals that to advance clean energy, create clean energy jobs across the country. So that's the other venue to really think about over the next 4 years.
Thank you. So before I say something about the IRA, let me say something. This is only one of the important legislation pieces that are out there. The bipartisan infrastructure law, massively important. The CHIPS Act, massively important. Annual appropriations, massively important. The budget, massively important. Workforce development laws, massively important. These are all of a piece and we need them all. And for me, as much as the IRA is important, and it is, I'm worried about the money committed under the bipartisan infrastructure law for clean energy demonstrations. Some of the $8 billion that DOGE is proposing raking back will set this country back a generation. We will lose investment, we will lose workers. With those projects are bipartisan, they're bicameral, they were vetted, they were competed, they are 70% in red districts, 30% in blue districts. They are the future of the country. They will keep us competitive for a long time. Ending those projects, raking back their money, will chill investment for 20 years and we'll lose a generation of workforce. I can't be more strenuous about this. That really should not happen. With respect to the IRA itself, I would add just a little bit to what the other two have already said. There are a huge number of tax credits out there of all kinds. The clean manufacturing tax credit, 48C, is one example of this. But these things, 45J, which is about nuclear power, is one of these. Taking a scalpel, I think, actually undercuts the broad bipartisan support that it has, actually. What you're actually saying is, I don't like all of the above. Instead of all of the above, I only like my stuff. That's not a way to craft enduring policy. That's not a way to build American energy dominance. It's not a way to be competitive globally. We actually want to compete on all these fronts. And so I am hopeful, I am kind of optimistic that the members of Congress will actually keep these broad set of provisions because actually they help the nation as a whole.
So Carolyn, you referenced some of the work at the state level. I'm going to ask all of you to comment. I'll start with Carolyn. Just on general trends, sort of the bright spots you're seeing at the state level. What are some of the sort of most innovative things you're seeing at the state level? Certainly, we're familiar with climate action plans and all those kinds of things. In California, we pride ourselves on being on the forefront on that. But maybe beyond California, what are you seeing out there, and what gives you optimism at the state level?
Yeah, we're seeing a couple trends at the state level, and the exciting answer is that I get to talk a lot about a lot of things that are happening in other states that I wish California would adopt. So we're seeing when it comes to state policy, we're seeing a lot of states be really innovative, and sometimes it's not necessarily the places that immediately come to mind, which is exciting. It's good. We're seeing a huge uptick in geothermal legislation. After the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, we saw a huge increase in legislation across the country. We're seeing uptick in legislation on things like Climate Superfund. I don't know if y'all have seen, we're in the middle of an insurance crisis. I don't know if anyone's feeling that with their homes. I know some people here from Los Angeles. The insurance crisis and the insurance market meltdown from climate-fueled disasters is really accelerating. So there's legislative pathways that we can do to solve some of those challenges. That, as you can imagine, has seen a huge increase in volume. And we're seeing legislation to deal with that. We're seeing Climate Superfund legislation, where folks who emit carbon pollution, that causes climate change, they're creating superfunds so that those funds can actually be used to help folks who are in the middle of climate disasters, whether that's extreme flooding in Houston or extreme wildfires in Colorado or Los Angeles. So I think that's really helpful and is going to help with some of these cost and price increases that we're seeing from the really devastating effects of climate change from Western North Carolina. I mean, we can just go down the list on what we've seen over the last year. And there's ways to kind of solve the affordability crisis with state policy. It's exciting. Yeah, we can do stuff. It's nice.
Other national or international trends maybe that you're seeing, Julio and Christina, things that give you optimism as we look out there?
Oh, quite a lot, actually. So one of the things we're starting to see states do, for example, is to use their procurement authority. That's a great lever. Buying clean concrete, buying clean steel, clean fuels, all these things. That direct procurement anchors companies, gives them financeable options. Like that is a hugely terrific thing to see. Internationally, while the United States may be stepping back, while Europe may be stumbling a bit, we're seeing other countries boldly run forward. We're actually seeing Japan creating its own new carbon exchange. We're seeing Brazil creating very strong climate laws and new carbon markets with it. We're seeing some states in the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Qatar, really stepping forward and showing leadership. I would point, for example, at COP28 in Dubai, the president of the COP, Sultan Al Jaber, announced not only the loss and damage fund, but also $100 billion fund to invest in developing countries to give them energy abundance through clean energy investments. This kind of leadership is really making a difference in the world. And I think we're starting to see a kind of multipolar system emerge in which more countries are showing more activity.
Happily talk a little bit about international. I think the thing I'm really excited about right now is actually just kind of like a global embrace for nuclear and advanced technologies in nuclear. It was a big focus when we were at COP last year, but it's also one of those things where, it's an American success story, right? We are very, very good at building nuclear power, and we're very good at exporting it, operating it, and doing it safely. A lot of advanced reactors are also US designed. So, I'm still planning to go to COP this year in Brazil. But what I'll say is it definitely seems like there's kind of a reassessment of previously held feelings about nuclear, some of which were warranted, some of which were based in maybe watching the Chernobyl documentary a few too many times. But if we're really going to decarbonize at a rapid pace, those next generation technologies are incredibly important. And as you can see from countries like Australia reconsidering their moratorium, that's a really great way to get deep decarbonization done.
So let's zero in, if we can, on clean electricity and the grid. I think it's clear we need to bring more power online as quickly as possible. There is a consensus there. But without diving too deeply to the nuances of grid policy, what are the main obstacles to doing so, to seeing that consensus sort of become a reality out there in the marketplace? What policies should we prioritize at the federal level to see that actually come to fruition? And maybe Christine, I'll start with you here.
Sure. Well, I already talked about the tax credits, so I'll spare you there. I think a big thing is going to be permitting reform. It takes a lot of time to build anything. And when you take a look at kind of the forecast of projects that are going to get decommissioned because of age or because of other issues, we see a cliff in the horizon. So how do we make sure we're able to weather that? And the answer is making it easier but equally stringent, and making just projects have certainty or death. Instead of stringing companies along for a decade, how do we give them a decisive, yes, if you build, you've got a thumbs up, go forth? That's something that we really lack at the federal level and also at the state level. It takes a really long time to take projects from idea to reality. So the more that we can figure out permitting reform, it has a tremendous opportunity for deploying more clean energy technologies. If you look at interconnection queues, a lot of the technologies there, they're clean technologies that are waiting. So, everyone thinks that permitting reform is, something that only the big, oil and gas companies are asking for. I've got totally clean companies asking me for help on permitting. It is just too hard to build things. And when we look at AI and EVs, we need to do it quicker. And that's something I'm excited about. And I think there is a way to do it in a bipartisan manner.
First of all, can we all get an amen on that? Like, that's absolutely true. there are 30,000 projects waiting for the interconnect queue. 80% of them die before they even get to the gate. This is terrible. In addition to permitting reform, though, one of the things I would strongly recommend is infrastructure policy. We do not have the transmission lines we need. The Princeton team in their Net Zero America report showed that even with 100% renewable energy and efficiency sort of focus, you need to quintuple the grid. We need 5x the transmission capacity that we have. Things like reconductoring technology are cool and they can help, but good Lord, we need more infrastructure. We need transmission lines, bus bars, interconnects. We need corridors that are pre-approved. We need to start moving and building stuff. I'm actually somewhat optimistic about this because I think the Republicans in the House and Senate actually want to build. They're looking at this as the opportunity to build stuff. Great, let's build some stuff. And electricity infrastructure is good for electrifying everything. We can't electrify everything if we can't move the electrons. So let's do that for sure.
Yeah, I would love to build stuff. I would say the recent cancellations by the Trump administration of the offshore wind projects are terrible. And I would love to see more administrative leadership. I mean, it's interesting because we've been talking about permitting reform for a few years, and now with the global trade war and the tariffs, the cost of raw materials is quickly going to become a huge barrier to actually deployment. And so we're in a shift where permitting is still very important to focus on, but also not ignoring the recent proposal to put 3,000% tariffs on where most of our solar panels come from is not going to build the clean energy future that we want. And I would say there's one case study that I think really illustrates where some of the barriers to clean energy build are. The state of Arizona has fewer solar jobs than the state of Massachusetts. Which is, I mean, listen, you can go get a whole degree in climate science or clean energy or become an engineer, but like Arizona's hot. That should not come on. And so what's blocking building solar in Arizona? It's political will. Pass market creating policies. Give people clean energy jobs that pay well and let people kind of have that life. And instead it's just this it's honestly like a baseline political opposition towards a technology that could lower electricity rates for people and build a clean energy economy. And so sometimes when we're in a policy or political conversation, there are common sense things we can do, and then we run those common sense things against this. Sometimes, I don't know if anyone else feels like this kind of wild political atmosphere where like, this makes complete sense, what's going on. That's something we do a lot at Climate Cabinet, is figure out what's going on and what are the tools we need to change that dynamic. So I'd say some of the barriers are, if you don't have you need kind of full buy-in, federal, state, local, and getting these things across the finish line. And we do have states across the country that are kind of on this other pathway that isn't doing anything for the economy or anything for solving climate change or building clean energy anyway. So I think, and taking all of those piecemeal and fixing those barriers is what we have to do as a community.
So bringing power online to the grid was the subject of a full Energy and Commerce Committee hearing. There's definitely a lot of energy on both sides of the aisle on this issue. And I wanted to mention Nathan Dadap as my legislative assistant who flew out from Washington, D.C. to be here today. And Nathan, raise your hand in case anybody in the room has follow-up that we need to attend to. And Nathan was kind enough to prep me a little bit here, and I wanted to mention 94% of all, and most of the people in this room probably know this already, but 94% of all projects that are currently in the queue to connect to the grid are clean energy projects. There are many reasons for this, but primarily it's because utility scale solar and wind is now the cheapest and quickest energy source to deploy. On the flip side, due to supply chain constraints, there's a 5-year wait to procure a gas turbine. So just a few notes to keep in mind as we move forward in our discussion here. And turning to artificial intelligence, Washington is obsessed as you might expect with this topic, with no real clarity, honestly, on how to move forward as this technology just continues to evolve so rapidly. But artificial intelligence and the associated expansion of data centers is one of the drivers of electricity growth. Considerable attention has focused on the potential climate downsides and risks of these facilities, but some folks are also thinking about how AI might enable and accelerate new climate solutions. For example, connecting renewable energy to the grid. So the question for the panel, how do you think about the potential benefits and risks of this important and emerging technology? And whoever wants to take the first swing at that. Yes, sir.
If I may. Great question. I'm pleased to say that over the past 2 years, we've written 2 roadmaps for the Japanese government on this topic, on how AI can be used to improve climate and energy. And you can go to if you just do ICEF roadmaps, you'll find it. Or you can go to the Center on Global Energy Policy at Columbia, you'll find it. These roadmaps, the second one is 350 pages long, full of stuff about how AI can do the good stuff. And it covers every sector. It covers power, manufacturing, transportation, carbon capture, nuclear, some cross-cutting issues, including the energy demands. We put up a whole chapter there on the energy demands associated with AI and data centers and ways that that can be improved and things we know and we don't know. So I would encourage people to do that. At Carbon Direct, we've also written a handful of blogs and reports on this topic. So please take a look. The interconnect is a good example of this. This massive backlog of projects, there's a couple of things AI could do out of the gate. One of them is help with the permitting. You gotta write huge permits, you gotta review huge permits. Can the government even use that today with AI that hasn't been resolved? Maybe we can use these tools that we're using for our day-to-day work to speed the permitting process. If you double click on that, there's an example where every interconnect project permit requires a power flow model. There are not enough people in the United States to make the power flow models for this demand. AI can do that, and an expert can review it. So there's ways that you can harness it just for the permitting in a way that is extraordinary. But beyond that, though, you can actually use it for things like real-time balancing of the grid to make sure that you can add more renewables without changing the frequency or changing the load dynamics. Like these are pretty straightforward things, and that is true for all of these things. AI can create digital twins of everything. Right now, Amazon is using them to have digital twins of all of their operations so that they can find mistakes and fix them as they go. Hey, how about we do that for a new nuclear reactor? How about we do that for a new natural gas with carbon capture? How about we do that for a new sustainable aviation fuels facility so that we're making digital twins and letting the AI reduce the risk, reduce the failure rate, improve the outcomes, reduce the cost. I will say that on the energy piece, there's a reason to be concerned about this. I'm not going to say otherwise. We haven't done great on this so far. I also think this is not a sky is falling moment. We are already seeing some of the hyperscalers pulling back and saying, well, we might not build this data center because we're not sure we need the demand. The technology for AI is changing rapidly. The use cases for AI are changing rapidly. And as a consequence, they don't necessarily know what the demand will be. Even in that context, for the most part, these guys want to buy clean. They are trying to pay more money to reduce the load on ratepayers. And things like FERC rules prevent them from doing this. I do think there's a way to do it right. I do think there's a way to do it wrong. And it's up to us to make sure that we do it right. So I would keep our eye on the ball. I would keep collecting information. But we want these tools for a clean, verdant, just future. And I hope that we use more of them.
We've been involved in some of the data center legislation in states across the country. Huge explosion in interest in this legislation. I would say a lot of folks trying to build data centers verbally say they would like to do it right, and then when you show up in the halls of the state capitol, their position changes. So one thing that we're really proposing here is a Beyonce framework. It's build your own clean energy. Great. Building data centers should be built with clean energy, and importantly, not building a huge build out of gas plants that will use stranded assets in the future. I think that's really critical. So that's the framework we're taking to think about state policy and thinking about AI and data center growth. Also, as an organization, we use AI to get our work done more efficiently and quickly. But it's about, again, Beyonce model. Don't think about the acronym too much. People squished a few of those words to make this happen. But the point is, it's build your own clean energy, and that's what we're expecting from folks connecting to the grid, which is future-proofing too. We're going to solve climate change. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so making sure that folks are investing in assets that we can see online in 2050 and 2060 and 2070 with our climate goals is really critical right now and isn't going to leave taxpayers and ratepayers stuck with stranded assets into the future.
Trying to come up with a Carl Barry Carter pun, and I've failed. But what I'll say that's maybe a little bit different from the others, before going to CRES, worked at Tesla, and obviously AI is a strategic good in the United States of America. We want the back ends in the United States of America. We want to make sure we control end technology, period, end stop, just from a national security perspective. So the question is, how do we make sure hyperscalers can get clean energy at scale at an affordable rate? I look at companies that are investing in geothermal, advanced nuclear, and what I'm seeing is more like in the short term, I think exactly the Beyonce issue was very real. They are being a little bit of a diva in the sense that they just need every electron they humanly can. But in the long run, I'm actually very excited because I think that they are going to scale two technologies that are incredible opportunities for clean baseload, and that is geothermal and advanced nuclear. So in the short run, it's how do we build the cleanest stuff as fast as humanly possible, knowing that they are going to buy some turbines. But in the long run, how are we helping those next generation technologies get onto scale? Someone once told me we're always in an energy transition. And right now, the energy transition feels like we're going towards these like distributed energy resources, and we will be. But we then will transition to cleaner, firmer technologies we might not even have available yet. We might get fission and fusion at crazy scales. Who knows? But what I think I'm excited about is even the chips themselves are getting smarter and cleaner. The newest NVIDIA chip is 20,000 times less energy intensive, okay? So everyone's preparing for 3 times the amount of energy. I tend to believe we do need a ridiculous amount of energy on the grid, but I also see probably something that's gonna be invented that none of us know about yet that will maybe mitigate those worst impacts. So the question is, how do we get towards those next clean, firm technologies? How do we get those technologies to scale as quick as possible? Because I think that's what policy should be focusing on to really kind of mitigate the negative environmental effects of that scale.
So let's talk about other kinds of energy besides electricity. We need low carbon heat for industrial processes. We need clean fuels. What kinds of policies do we need to stimulate decarbonization of those sectors, looking at sort of the big industrial users? Any thoughts, whoever wants that one first?
You mentioned advanced procurement. That's something states can do right now, and states have done across the country. So Washington has advanced procurement on a few technologies. There's increased interest in advanced procurement around low carbon cement, which is fantastic. That's something you can think of state policy and federal policy, but let's talk about state policy for the next 4 years. You can think about state policy as kind of it creates markets and it can accelerate markets. So that's a huge market creator. It sets a price signal. It says, hey, new technology, hey, entrepreneur, you can build this company because when it gets to this cost, you have procurement. And so that gives people great line of sight into building a business. It gives line of sight into investors for investing in a business. So that's the type of technologies that I think are really exciting in this sector. It's the market creating policies that are fantastic. And I think we have some folks here from Fervo, geothermal company. Yeah, let's go. And there are right now jurisdictions across the US who say, hey, 24/7 clean, we're interested in signing contracts. And what that does is create markets for companies like Fervo and companies just like it across the country.
2 internal, 1 external sets of policies. Let's talk about supply side policies. For these things, we need clean fuels, great. We're not supporting the production of clean fuels. We're just not to the level at which we need to. So that could be things like maintaining the 45Z tax credit or the 45V tax credit, but it could also be other kinds of stimulants. Demonstrations are really important for the emerging technologies here. That demonstration money is essential. I would also say things like just contract for difference support. If it costs more for a sustainable aviation fuel than a regular fuel, the government can pay the difference. That's how you get the cost down, that's how you scale. On the demand side, it's equally important. One of the things we learned after the IRA is actually sometimes supply side isn't enough. So as one example, clean fertilizer takes a lot of hydrogen, takes a lot of heat, okay? Making clean hydrogen doesn't deliver entirely. How about giving farmers some money to buy clean hydrogen? That demand signal would actually create the companies and the bakeable offtakes that a company like Cargill could turn into a real facility and start making clean fertilizer for the US and abroad. This takes me to the third policy thing, trade policy. Right now, we're looking down the barrel of Europe's carbon border adjustment mechanism, the CBAM. Japan is thinking about doing the same thing. What are we going to do to enable US companies to compete in that landscape? How do we actually get ourselves to a position where we are exporting clean goods to countries that they cannot make themselves? I think that's a great outcome. And there's support the Export-Import Bank could give. There's low-cost loans through the Loan Program Office. There's all kinds of things we could do to support a competitive American industry based on trade of clean goods.
Well, you touched 45Z, which for those who don't know the alphabet soup is biofuels, and 45V, for those who don't know alphabet soup, is hydrogen. But I'll also add 45Q, which is carbon capture and sequestration. The three of them kind of work together to create an ecosystem for decarbonizing kind of those hard to abate areas. So, the more that we can help get direct air capture off the ground, I constantly tell people it's not a giant vacuum that sucks the bad stuff out of the air. It actually can create end products that we all use every single day. The more that we are investing today in kind of, the hydrogen, the carbon capture, and the biofuels, the better, because those are technologies that right now we don't really have a perfect way to decarbonize them at scale. So early investment in these technologies domestically will help us with trade in the long run. Many hydrogen companies will take their product, they'll turn it into ammonia, they'll export it abroad. There is a global market for this stuff. And so, keeping the tax credits there is really impactful because China is massively investing here. And if we don't do that early stage investment, we're kind of ceding ground and territory, but also we're losing those long-term benefits towards those industries that we've really struggled with reducing emissions in.
Just a quick follow on that. Just yesterday, 2 weeks ago, China announced 100 projects, 100 state-sponsored projects across the board on all kinds of clean energy production and manufacturing, including fuels, including clean products. Shame on us if we don't step up to that challenge.
So I want to turn to workforce issues, labor. There are two important choke points in the energy transition, workforce and infrastructure. So what kinds of policies can help us create the physical and human assets we need to supercharge this energy transition? Maybe we'll start with Carolyn.
There are a few pieces to this. I think we have seen some great kind of state legislation around community college programs. So there's some great wind technician, one of the fastest growing industries in the US, wind technician programs at schools across the country, making sure that we're integrating the industries of the future with opportunities throughout our educational system to make sure folks are ready once they graduate. There's also a great, this is not as exciting to talk about, but there's really great, really wonky enabling legislation to build big projects in America. And
I'm excited.
Okay, thank you. That's very nice. Great. Well, then I'm going to do one example from the state of Illinois. There's a bill right now going through the state of Illinois, and if you're bored to tears through this example, that's fine. If you're on your phone, I don't blame you. What it does is it takes multiple transit agencies around the Chicagoland area and says, hey, why don't we consolidate these? I don't know if anyone's from the Bay, so you don't have to go from
there.
Great. Yeah. Oh, we've got applause for this one. All right. This is a wonky crowd. Okay. And it consolidates it so that we can do regional transit planning. It's so frustrating to go, you're on a bus, and then you're on the BART, and then you're on the Muni, and then you're on the Caltrain, and you're like, what? How many cards do I need to get from point A to point B? And this is fantastic. Great climate benefits, but also people should have transportation choices, great opportunity for folks. And you shouldn't have to buy a $10,000, $20,000, much more expensive. You shouldn't have to buy that type of vehicle that's over $20,000 to participate in the modern economy. And that's what this legislation is getting us towards. So that's fantastic and extremely wonky, but good. How do we build big things? A great example out of Illinois, it hasn't passed yet. So if anyone's from there, call your state lawmakers. Great, thanks. Got it.
So when people think about workforce, sometimes they think about scientists and engineers only. That's a mistake, but we do need more scientists and engineers. Actually, pulling back scientific research is a mistake. We need more scientists and engineers. America's greatest asset is its innovation base. We need to keep feeding that. We need more patents. We need more entrepreneurs. We need more scientists and engineers getting in the field. And the CHIPS Act actually supports some of that. Provisions in the bipartisan infrastructure law support that. States could do more to support that. So there's a lot that we can do. If you double click though, the next thing you hit is the trades, electricians, welders. These are some of the groups that Carolyn was talking about. We are starting to see support for that. It is hilariously outgunned by the need. We don't have anywhere near the specialty trades that we need to actually build the future we want. But if you go beyond that double click, we are equally hilariously outgunned on everything. We do not have the communications experts in climate who can actually do the job. We don't have tax equity lawyers who really understand this stuff across the economy. We don't have people who design ports who are thinking about a clean economy of the future. Like almost, this is a team sport in the biggest sense. Like we actually need more people in every discipline, and we need adult education and ongoing education. We need executive training. We need additional legal representation. We sort of need all of this. This is the thing that keeps me up at night, actually. The thing we lack in spades is the workforce, and it's not just the US and the globe. To the last word on that, I think this is another opportunity for America to lead, to show dominance. People come to the United States to get educated on all kinds of things. People come to the United States to get financiers because we're good at it, to get entrepreneurs because we're good at it. We should be exporting the know-how of the workforce to the rest of the world. People should come to the United States because they're like, the US makes the best clean energy people. I want to come here, whether they're welders or whether they're communications experts or whether they're engineers.
I was supposed to come up with a witty, like, what America's the #1 at, and you said sports, and I was like, well, the women's rowing team is the best in the world, so just saying. In all seriousness, I think, politics aside, today the president actually talked about this in an executive order. He talked about workforce development and getting 1 million new people into the trades. And I think that does underscore the fact that this is a place where there can be bipartisan progress, right? Getting good community colleges, getting better people into apprenticeship programs. That is a place that we might be able to see some progress on over the next 4 years. So take that as an ounce of optimism. I do think that, there's also kind of a, real issue with getting people into the trades. Like it's not something that people are super excited about. We've definitely had like an overcommitment to 4-year colleges, but a lot of these programs for the trades are actually not many years, which is really incredible. Like if you can make $120,000 after, a 2 to 3 year apprentice program and you have no debt, that's very compelling, especially, I'm from the Midwest. That's something that is very compelling. It's just very difficult to get young folks to really want to do it. And so the more that you kind of build out these community college programs, the more that you make this an available thing, it would be very helpful. I will say that there's also a big movement towards advanced manufacturing and automation, which the United States is actually incredible at. But we are behind in China because, to your point, they spend an obscene amount of money to kind of deflate international markets, and they're going to keep doing that. But I will say that we are getting very good, again, at building things. And so that's why you need to keep, the 45X tax credit. You need to continue that advanced manufacturing, because if you don't continue having business continuity, to a previous point you made, you really are chilling those investments. And then why are kids going into a field that they don't see will be stable enough for them to commit to for the long run?
So I think you referenced the one executive order I'm okay with.
We look for the gems when we can find them, sir.
So my district here on the peninsula has more life sciences companies than any other district in America, and it actually grew up in my hometown. And for so long, it was PhD heavy. Obviously still is very science heavy. But as the industry grew, as these companies grew, it became a real general employer with partnerships with the community colleges and so forth. And you could see how there's an incredible middle class job pipeline opportunity here as this sector matures. So I wanted to talk just a little bit about carbon removal. We have already hit 1.5 degrees Celsius and continue to use fossil fuels. There is now a consensus that to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we'll need to add CO2 removal to our climate toolkit. So what kinds of policies can both support an abundant energy agenda and begin the work of carbon removal? Let's go, Julio.
This is kind of my bag. So let's start with actually the science. Again, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change came out pretty strongly in 2018 that we have already overshot and we need this technology to be useful and to be scaled. Last year we had 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial for sure. The year before the same. We are now in overshoot, and the consequences of that are awful. It's just another one of the things we need to do. It's the 12th miracle on top of the 11 miracles we are already tackling, but it's just part of the work now. We have to do CO2 removal. And in doing so, we have to be omnivores. It must be all of the above. I am a fan of a particular class of technologies. I think you've heard of them. Trees. Trees do fine. But it's not just like you plant a tree and walk away, actually. You are creating an ecosystem and managing it forever. That's what reforestation is. But it requires a lot of investment, a lot of time, a lot of effort. So does carbon mineralization. So does direct air capture. So do all these technologies. This industry has to scale to the size of the entire global gas industry or double the entire global gas industry. Right now, the world uses 5 billion tons a year of oil and gas. We need to remove 10 billion tons a year of carbon dioxide to keep our climate budgets. And we have 30 years to get there. So this is not optional, it's required. And in that context, we really need to support them broadly with policies. And all of the policies we've talked about here are relevant. Procurement policy out of the gate. SB 308 in California was a great policy, didn't make it across the finish line. They're trying again this year. That's good. The DOE pilot program to purchase CO2 removal by the US government, $35 million is the ante, but we should do that. Canada's doing $10 million. Great, we need more of that. In addition to procurement, how about hidden procurement? How about, hey, Army Corps of Engineers, every time you buy concrete, you have to put some money in a fund and buy CO2 removal. It's an invisible line item. How about something like that that just supports US companies and global companies doing more? In addition to that, how about setting a target? We've set renewable electricity targets. How about setting a CO2 removal target? Because it's one of the things we need to do. Just say, hey, by 2040, we will remove this amount. By 2050, we will remove this amount. Put it into law that we put other commitments into law. Send that signal to the world, send that signal to the market so that people can start knowing that if they invest in these companies and projects, they'll get built. And again, I would be technology omnivorous. This is nonpartisan. Everybody can benefit from this. It will be the biggest enterprise of human history if we do this right. And that means there's an opportunity of abundance that's real.
There are a few specific state policies, and these could be federal too, but as much as I wish we were in a nonpartisan environment right now on this climate topic, we have opportunity at the states. I will pivot out of that. So legislation in states right now that affects our ability to build abundant clean energy across the country. We need utility reform. These are bills that have already been introduced in state capitals. For example, we've talked a lot about barriers to building clean energy projects. Sometimes that barrier is the regulatory environment. A lot of times, y'all, that barrier is the monopoly utility who blocks kind of independent power producers from entering into the market. And I used to work in the solar industry, and the folks pushing our projects, and they were waiting for years and years and years, was sometimes the monopoly utility in charge of the electric grid, especially North Carolina. So we have utility reform bills that need to go through, instituting new ways of interconnecting to the grid, ideas like connect and manage, which is a different way of interconnection that's much faster and is very interesting. There's a great white paper on it on the internet. Connect and manage. There's only 3 things that show up on Google, so it should be pretty easy to find. So that's great. Utility reform to say, hey, we have to let more clean, independent power producers into the grid. You're not allowed to just, hey, monopoly utility, as part of your social contract, you're not allowed to just shut down clean energy projects because you don't own it. You have to let those folks in. You have to allow competition. And that's really helpful, especially with such a low cost electricity source like wind or solar. And finally, we have to stop some really bad bills going through states and going through Fed, but talking about states. There is this bill going through North Carolina right now called a construction work in progress bill. I'm going to skip over some of the details, but basically when you pay your electricity bill, you should be paying just for the electrons that come into your house. That's what I think. Every time I pay I'm like, thanks for the electrons, here's your money. There's this type of bill they're trying to push right now, and it's rising, unfortunately, across the country that says your utility can charge you for that power plant before it's even built. While they're building it, before a single electron has entered into your house, you still have to pay it on your electricity bill. That should not be allowed. And guess what? In this legislation in North Carolina, does it apply to any solar plants they want to build? No, it does not. Does it apply to any geothermal plants they wanted to build? No, it does not. It's available to gas plants. So there's this weaponization of the permitting process, and there's this weaponization that we're seeing of some of these interconnection queues and things like that to stack the deck against the technologies that we need. And it's really, so there's good things we got to pass, and there's stuff that we got to stop. And these are big places where opportunities for us to continue building the clean energy future.
I am going to take a slightly different approach. How many of you guys have been to Baytown, Texas? It's kind of like the oil and gas capital of the world. All right.
I got my driver's license.
When you look to the right, oil. Look to the left, oil. But when I was there, I was next to a direct air capture facility at the ExxonMobil headquarters there, and it smelled good. Like, I was actually kind of like struck by it. I was like, this is pretty awesome. And they said that they're investing in this because they know the international market is going to demand it, right? So they're making this investment, even though they're not forced to do it, et cetera, because like in the long run, if they want to stay in business, it's going to be a part of the cost of doing business. If you ever have the ability to go down there, it's really cool. It really doesn't look like anything super fancy, but when you realize what it's doing is sucking out carbon from the air and then creating a pretty much just like a chunk of carbon junk that doesn't harm anyone, doesn't do anything bad, doesn't really make much sound. That's cool technology that we need to continue investing in. So what is the federal government doing there? And I think, it's been touched on a little bit, but we do have a loan program office that gives money. So for folks that don't have the same deep pockets as maybe an ExxonMobil have, they can start innovating in this space. How are we making it so that we have demonstrations at our national laboratories? And I think, this has been talked about a little bit, but, the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, they both had funds for those types of demonstrations. And we do need to keep that going, right? So even if there is like a change in, leadership, pointing out to members of Congress on the other side of the aisle and saying, hey, did you know these are benefiting Republican districts? Do you know that this is something that your oil and gas friends really want? Are you aware of that? Most of them aren't. So a lot of what I do is I teach them that, hey, like this isn't that hypothetical vacuum in the air to suck stuff out. This is a real business. And it's also a real business that businesses are investing in because they know they need it for long-term diversification of their companies. They're not going to be able to operate or sell products without investing in there heavily. So the more that we can help that technology scale, which is part of why 45Q is so important, that's what we need to keep on the federal level, because even if, we get all of the green technology in the world deployed, there's still going to be parts of the world that will be using fossil fuels for the foreseeable future.
Sorry, quickly, if I may. A little closer than Baytown, Texas is Tracy, California. Raise your hand if you've been to Tracy. There you go. Yep, homegrown direct air capture company, Heirloom, which is, I believe, in your district, Congressman, in Brisbane. Their pilot demonstration is out there. If you have the opportunity, I recommend swinging by and taking a look. It's pretty awesome.
So we have just a few more minutes in the panel. I'm going to go off script just a tiny bit. So you mentioned the IRA, the bipartisan infrastructure law. The challenge for some of us, you talk to members of the public who aren't policy wonks, listen to NPR, they don't really know what those things are. They don't really know how it benefits them. So just kind of a general question, we have cost of living week. We have these like sort of branded weeks in the House Democratic Caucus, and this is cost of living week, where we highlight the challenges that families are dealing with a variety of costs and sort of structuring events around that. So my question is about sort of the consumer perception of clean energy as this market gets built out. You've got, a president with a megaphone, and he's able to cut through sort of media noise and will hammer away on drill, baby, drill to lower your energy costs. How do we counter those kinds of things? How do we, from a consumer side and a public opinion side, win this sort of narrative challenge and make it very clear to the average consumer that as we build out clean energy and transition to a clean energy economy, this really has enormous benefits, not just for the planet, but for individual pocketbooks? How do we win that conversation?
We're in such a new media environment, and our whole society, I think, is grappling with being in a new media environment. It's just a historic shift to go from decades of kind of legacy media, TV-based media, to a extremely fragmented media landscape, and a media landscape in which the credentialing is about personal charisma and innovation on TikTok and YouTube, rather than a historic credentialing pathway. Or we all have seen stuff on the internet that isn't right, but a lot of people viewed, or it's through kind of heightened emotion, and it gets disconnected from facts. So that's the media environment that we live in now. And I think when it comes to government affairs strategy, communication strategy, making sure if anyone is dealing with any misinformation or is running or you're working on, making sure that you have a media strategy that's centered around that, and having that skill set and that expertise on the team, I think, is easier said than done. But there's a lot of really innovative things happening on climate, where folks are really leveraging these new technologies and these new mediums to get their message out. I mean, I think we're seeing that the rise of social media and the rise of this has created global instability, and that's not good. And our reaction to that has to be smarter and more intelligent, and kind of step into this new age of extremely fragmented media ecosystems. So that's, I mean, it's a tough ask, and one that, if you've been an extremely professional and experienced person in this field for a long time, it's a big step change.
So let me start by saying I don't claim to have good answers here. I have thoughts, but I don't claim to have good answers. I have walked this country broadly for many, many years. I've seen a lot. Fundamentally, two things I believe. One, many Americans think gasoline comes from their corner pump station and electricity comes from their wall. They do not think beyond that. The idea that we can educate a generation of Americans to understand the energy system and then they will make better decisions, like, no. The converse to that, the complement to that, is Americans want the energy system to be three things all the time: cheap, clean, and invisible. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to make decisions. They just want it to be cheap, clean, and invisible. And I think part of the story needs to be communicating that. We will make it cheap. We will make it clean. We're going to do this so that you don't have to. This is not necessarily a movement building exercise. I'm not opposed to movement building exercises, but there was no movement that asked for the 1992 wind production tax credit. There was no public outcry that asked for SB 1368 in 2006 that set carbon limits on the grid. Like, a lot of this can be done politically and visibly. I think that's actually a strength. If you can make it politically invisible, then people can do the right thing and they don't take flack for it. That's why I like things like procurement buried in the Army Corps of Engineers procurement bill. This is stuff that you can actually do a lot of the good stuff without tub thumping. And if you deliver the goods, then people are happy. And if you say, by the way, it's cleaner, by the way, it's cheaper, by the way, you didn't have to think about it, I think people will be glad with that. I'm not sure that that's a communication strategy at all. It's kind of the opposite, but I think it's relevant in this discussion.
What do you do if, Trump is permanently online, like he's tub thumping? So what advice would you have for someone who's saying, this is my ecosystem? How should folks respond to that in this moment?
All of these investments are multi-generational investments. The money knows better, and they don't listen to that nonsense. They screen it. There are certainly people out there who are acting in bad faith, who are saying incorrect things, who are trying to stack their deck. I do think you have to kind of get in those people's grill. That is true on the left and on the right. There's nonsense all around, but when you hear nonsense, you should call it out. But you can't keep pace with a president of the United States who just says stuff constantly. You have to stick to what's important and what's good. And it's not about messaging. It's actually about enacting law. It's actually about enacting law. And as the lawmakers get increasingly on the margins, as the media is dominated by the ends of the dumbbells, the heavy lifting gets done in the middle. People like Senator Carper, who you may never have heard of, passes laws because he works across the aisle and thinks carefully and does the good stuff. There's a way to get the laws passed that is independent of the media environment. I know that these are not fully independent. I know that political people live in a media environment. They think about the politics. But many lawmakers, the majority of lawmakers, want two things more than anything else. They don't want to pass a bad law, and they'd like to pass a good law. And if you can give them a good law to pass, they're interested. The work starts there, it doesn't end there, but that's where I would start.
So I spend most of my time telling Republicans to be cool with this stuff. And I will just say younger generations get it, right? So part of this is a problem that I do think will age out, just in terms of like the attention going against, wind and solar and the whales and whale telepathy, that type of stuff. And I'm one of the very few Republicans that says nice things about offshore wind, by the way. In some places in the country, you're just going to need it. President goes out and he says, I want to kill all offshore wind. It's a personal vendetta to him. But at the same time, there are Republicans who have massive investments in their district, and they're calling the White House and saying, hey, stop it. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes, and what I focus on when I feel like I can't control an environment is there's the noise, and the noise is always going to be meant to polarize us one way or the other. And then to your point, you mentioned, Senator Carper. There are a lot of senators that are workhorses that aren't on Fox News, that aren't, trying to get a media moment every day. And those are the folks who are very thoughtful on this. Even the most conservative Republicans really do understand that we really need all the different electrons. I'll give you a handful of ones that on both sides really just are a little bit irrational, just generally on energy. I'll give everyone that. But when it comes to, is there a path forward? Is there a way to kind of push all these technologies together and through? I feel very optimistic about it. And the way that I like pointing to this and ways that I get Republicans to be okay with it is I point to farmers. They're the most trusted messenger Farmers love wind, they love solar, they love these clean technologies. They see them as a way to diversify income sources. When we talk about it in terms of affordability and strengthening kind of the heartland, it's a message that resonates very well in Washington and is something that I think, will get more attention during this administration as we shift from, a very climate forward president to one that is very energy dominance focused. So, to the extent that we can show that keeping the Inflation Reduction Act prevents energy bills by going up 10% a year. Statistics like that matter to voters on both sides of the aisle. Everyone cares about how it impacts their personal wallets. So I think, as much as we need new legislation, we need to protect the stuff that makes sense. And part of it means pointing out the affordability piece, pointing out that, these do supplement good American industries. And the more that we kind of drum that message, the more likely we are able to keep these things together. Because we're not always going to have this current chaotic environment, as you said. We'll get to the next election and whatever that is. But the thing is, we need to help get both sides of the aisle to kind of see that these technologies are good. And that kind of requires constant education and engagement with both sides of the aisle. Don't just talk to an ecosystem of yourself.
On that optimistic note, it's been an honor to be with all of you. Let's give our panel a round of applause.